Hello, everybody. My name is Vipin Jalago, so Secretary of KCCNA. Thank you all so much for being here on this first session of the KNA Talk. So our hope here is to bring more of these type of formats for these type of discussions on various topics to better help our community. So more to come. And if there's anything that you're passionate about in the future, feel free to reach out to myself or anyone on the executive committee, and then we can see how to take that forward. So for today's topic, it's something that all of us deal with: social media, cell phone, TikTok, Life 360. All of that is unavoidable in the days that we live in, and it's on us to properly embrace it. So today we hope to dig into that a little bit more and gain some good understanding of it from an expert. So to help with this, I had initially reached out to Molly Moynihan from the Center of Excellence on Social Media and Youth Mental Health from the American Academy of Pediatrics. It's a long title there, but when I reached out to her, she was very helpful in finding us an expert, and Dr. O'Shea. So Dr. Molly O'Shea, that's how we got in touch, and since then I've talked to her a couple of times. So she's a pediatrician and a parenting expert. She's a resident of Michigan and gained her undergraduate and medical education from University of Michigan, and she completed her residency at the Children's Hospital of Michigan in Detroit. She's been caring for kids and supporting families in Southeast Michigan ever since. And throughout her career, she's been active with the American Academy of Pediatrics and currently is an official spokesperson for AAP. She's also an ambassador for social media and youth mental health for the American Academy of Pediatrics. So she has a lot of information, a lot of research that she has on the topic. And what we hope is that we can use her expertise and hopefully deliver it to in a way that we can all comprehend and use in our day-to-day. So we're very lucky to have her with us. So once again, Dr. O'Shea, thank you very much for being here. The session is going to be organized into two separate sections. First section is going to be, she's going to give us some information, and the topics kind of build on each other. So we would like to hold the questions towards the second half of it. So towards the end, you will have a chance to ask some questions, and questions are welcomed. Those are, it might be the question that's in your mind is likely in everybody else's mind too. So just feel free to ask, and that'd be good. One important kind of ground rule that I want to set is to stay muted as much as possible. So unless you're asking a question, try to stay muted, and I think we'll have a productive session. So once again, Dr. O'Shea, thank you very much, and I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. It'll be, I hope, a really informative and an opportunity for all of your questions to get answered. So we'll lay some groundwork first. I've got some slides I'll share, and that will give us, kind of a shared starting off point to go from. Here, let me go back a slide. So we will be talking about how to navigate tech and social media with your kids and with your teenagers. I've looked in the chat. Thank you. Those of you who were able to put in the chat how old your kids are. It really does help me kind of gear what I want to say so that I meet the majority of the folks' needs. And many of you have tweens and teenagers. Some of you have young adults as well, and probably are like me, just hoping for grandkids, right? Well, I'll have my first in October, and it'll be awfully fun. But I think it's important before we even begin to really kind of recognize that there is no one right way to do anything as a parent. And what matters most is that each of us really looks and gets to know and embrace the children that we have in front of us. What we want or what we imagine we want from our children may or may not be who we were given by God and who we are, tasked with raising. So it's important to see our children in their uniqueness, in their, neurodiversity and who they really are, their differences. And given that, we will talk really carefully, but truthfully about what the harms, what the benefits, and what we can do as parents to try to help them reach adulthood, not only safely, because obviously that's important, but as adults ready to take on the world in which we live. So unlike us, right? Kids today are digital natives. Really, almost from the moment they're born, it seems to me, their first words may not be mama or dada. It might be hey Siri or Alexa. They're more used to FaceTiming with relatives than they are sometimes seeing them in person because of the way in which our world is arranged. So often we live far from each other, and families aren't just clustered together the way it used to be. And one of the beautiful advantages of technology is that it can keep us connected in ways that were much more difficult in the past. So kids today, from the time they're born, are having their photo taken and they're having their little videos done and they're FaceTiming with relatives. And so by the time they're 9 months old or a year old, as soon as their little finger can work things on the face of a phone, they can scroll through photos, sometimes better than we can. And being digital natives sometimes does, create a sensibility for us that tech competency is really important. And we do understand the importance of tech competency. We want our kids to be able to navigate the world where technology is so important. I mean, we were talking before many of you joined about AI and how it is fundamentally changing the world in which we live and creating both a sea change in the way jobs are going to be available, but also the kinds of ways in which kids are going to be learning. So, tech competency, very important. I think, though, one of the things that has shifted dramatically over the last couple of decades is the shift away from fostering independence and allowing for resilience building for our kids. So if you look at these images on the other half of this slide, the one of that kid walking by himself on a busy street in what appears to be a city, and the other child who's sitting on her own, kind of longingly looking at the front yard, it really paints a picture for us. When I look at these images, and when many parents who we talk to, when I talk to them, look at these images, the image on the left really does generate this sense of pride, this sense of, yes, I would really like my child to be like that kid. And on the other side of the slide, there's a feeling of, boy, is that kid safe? What's he doing out there by himself? Why is he walking the street alone? And this other child who is alone inside the house looking out, there is this idea that, well, no kid really at her age should be out in the yard playing by themselves anyway. So I know she's sad, but it's better that she's indoors. But really, what is what are the tools that people need to really be functioning in the world as adults? It takes so much more than competency in the classroom and intellectual capability. It takes the ability to work well with others in a team, to be able to negotiate and figure out how to make things work together without someone always stepping in to solve those problems. It takes being able to advocate for yourself, to be able to clearly communicate with one another and solve those miscommunication issues. It takes confidence. And confidence is something that you can't learn from a book. Confidence and courage and communication come from experience, actual lived experience. And children and teens, in order to gain those experiences, to learn that confidence and that courage and those communication skills, have to do things by themselves. They have to actually take risks. They have to fail. They have to have parents there to, of course, surround them with support when things do go wrong. But if every time a kid comes home from school in third grade and says, somebody was mean to me on the playground, and a parent says, oh, well, next time, why don't you do this, and gives a solution, that child doesn't learn how to solve their own problem. Instead, having parents whose child comes home in third grade and says, so and so was mean to me on the playground, having parents who say, boy, that sounds like that was hard. What are you going to do next time? And coach the kid to come up with a new solution to try. And when the child then tries it, ask, how did it go? And debrief. It may be a terrible solution. The kid might say, well, I'm going to punch him in the nose. And as a parent, you might say, wow, that seems like a pretty big, thing to do. What do you think might happen if you punch him in the nose? And your child might say, well, it'll stop bugging me. And you'll say, yeah, it could be, but maybe you might get in trouble too. So that's how you might coach to help a kid come up with a solution that could work without saying, well, next time maybe you should get the teacher, or next time maybe you should walk away, or next time maybe you should tell him to mind his own business. Because without figuring out how to solve the problem on their own, they won't know that they have the ability to. They won't have experimented. They won't have taken the risk of doing it. And they won't have succeeded or failed on their own, learning that, you know what? It doesn't always work. Kids also no longer do anything without adult supervision. It's, practically. Um, every single sport, every single dance class, every single thing kids do now is proctored by adults. And that proctoring results in a very different childhood experience. I want you to take a minute and think back to your own childhood. We all experienced a childhood, I would imagine, we're all of a certain age, where we were not proctored 100% of the time. Some of the time, we were just outdoors or in our home with other kids or wherever we were on the playground, whatever. And adults were blissfully unaware of anything we were doing. And so as a result, we had to negotiate the rules of the game, or we had to talk with some other kid if somebody else was, excluding us. We had to solve our own problems, or maybe we couldn't solve them, but we had to at least deal with the fallout of that and learning how to deal with the emotions of it, learning how to deal with the, figuring out all those situations and coming up with strategies was a really important series of events that occurred in childhood leading up to middle school and high school that gave us the confidence to then try new things and talk to each other in new ways during a period of huge personal growth that happens during the teenage years. So letting go is something as parents we need to do, but it's also something the teenagers are doing at the same time, right? They're kind of pushing you away. We have to let go. It's true for all of us. And it's scary. And it's something we have to be brave about. And we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go along. But it is really important. And when it comes to technology, which is what we're going to spend the majority of our time now talking about, you'll see how it gives you an opportunity to practice those skills as you go along. Because fostering independence and resilience in digital natives is going to be something you're going to be needing to do from the moment your child is born throughout the entirety of their timeline of life with you from a digital perspective. You have to figure out when to introduce different types of technology. You have to know what the risk and benefits of each one of those is, what guardrails to put in place, and how to teach them how to be safe and how to take risk in each of those kind of digital worlds or digital experiences. And some monitoring, guardrails, tracking is involved in those experiences. And learning when to place it and when to pull it back is so important. And as sort of a rubric for how to then apply the same sort of mindset to the rest of parenting is also really important. So let's look just quickly at that technology timeline for our kids. And, most of you have kids who are tweens and teens. So I'm going to kind of gloss over the early years. But kids under 7 or 8 years old really don't need much technology at all. They may have it just because they have older siblings or because it's convenient and handy as a parent to do things together and because technology is such an integrated part of our lives. But as far as utility and value, technology has almost zero value for kids in the pre-elementary school years. The only value is in co-watching. So if you're going to sit down and actually hang out with your kid and kind of do it together, there can be value there. You can get some added language skills and things like that. Once kids are in that 7 to 10-year-old range, then there can be some, not only can it be fun and entertaining for kids to be using technology, whether it's through some of the single player or multiplayer games, but they're using things at school for learning. And so there is some value. Also, many kids are beginning to have exposure to movies at the movie theater. Many have already seen movies at home as well at this point. And YouTube is almost ubiquitous at this age. By age 10, like fifth grade-ish, there's a frequent request for a phone. Kids start to really want and need to communicate with one another through texting around this age. And certainly by late middle school and high school, having some ability to communicate with texting becomes really important. Some of the social media apps we'll talk more in detail about later. When are those kind of, I will say they're never important, but when are they more valuable? So thinking about then devices, okay, so we've thought about kind of tech media. Now we're thinking about how is it delivered? Really until about the age of 10 to 12, no kid really needs a personal device of any type. And we'll talk about the value in having a family device rather than individual devices at those younger ages. And we'll also talk about why it's good to really do some queries of your children to understand their readiness for a cell phone, for example, and or a laptop to make sure that they're on track, that it is the right time for them. Things to think about with devices is to make their bedrooms a device-free zone until they are really for overnight sleeping. It would always be ideal to have that be a device-free zone in order to keep sleep protected. It's so difficult and tempting. Oh my gosh, it's tempting. It's tempting for me to, you know, not, it's tempting to put my phone down or not have it in my hand sometimes, especially if I'm having difficulty falling asleep. And for younger kids who have even more difficulty with executive function and sort of not listening to what they should be doing, if somebody sends them a text, you know they're going to pick up that phone if they hear it go off. So having that charging happen outside the bedroom throughout, even throughout most of high school would be really, really valuable. Also setting up times in your household that are from the very beginning, device-free times. Meals, for example. So dinner time at home or at a restaurant, device-free all the time, so that that's your family norm. And it creates then an opportunity for other kinds of arguments or connection. And arguments sometimes can be connection, but at least you're communicating. And I think it is a really good idea to have device-free meals, breakfast and dinner if you're having breakfast together too. Thinking then kind of about media consumption with kids, this really can help parents of kids of all ages just think in a very structured way about what is stuff that you can use more freely and what is stuff that really is like, the candy bar that you should maybe just have once in a while. Screens before bed, the TV on for no reason in the background, and screens during mealtime, that really should be a once in a great while situation. YouTube, which we're going to talk about in some detail in a few minutes, YouTube is really except for a very specific, oh, you know what, I gotta fix the sink. Let me go watch a YouTube video. But YouTube otherwise is really has very little redeeming value for kids or teenagers. First person shooter games, same thing. And social media, because of its inherent challenges when it comes to teenagers, especially those between the ages of 10 and 15. So that would be the occasional use. Moderately would be movies or TV, active video games like Wii or the VR games where you're moving while you're playing them. The interactive ebooks, you've seen those with for younger kids especially, where the ebook is on and they can act out the story. And then freely, obviously, chatting with your family. PBS is now kind of more of a stand-in for what is described as slow moving, kind of Mr. Rogers cadence, Daniel the Tiger, those sorts of shows and co-viewing those. And then things that are skill building or creating, so art or the how-to videos. And then freely, if you're connecting, like we're doing tonight, connecting with a group that you have things in common with, or listening to music or audiobooks or podcasts. So let's get into this briefly. Why not just avoid all the arguments and give every kid their own iPad so that you do not have to be like, okay, he gets it for 10 minutes and then she gets it for 10 minutes. And if I hear another word, then the iPad's going away. Why not just avoid all that and give everybody an iPad when they're 5? Like, happy 5th birthday, here's your iPad. Well, for several reasons. First of all, the years between 5 and 10 are the age when kids are so ripe for developing hobbies. Whether it's Lego building or bracelet making or dinosaur discovery in a really in-depth way or model building, kids can really develop hobbies at this age. We all know, because we also sit with our phones a lot, that if you have a passive play opportunity to play a single person game or whatever, you're very likely or to watch videos, that's going to be something you're going to kind of gravitate to. And as a parent, as much as we like to think we can police it like, crazy, it's hard. It's hard. And so having one iPad that everybody has to share really does create opportunities for the kids to have to negotiate the use. And you can say, look, everybody gets their however much time you decide is the time. You guys, you have to negotiate it. Who's going first, who's going second? Not my job. Not my job. But the time starts now and you only have until dinner, so see you at dinner time and let them negotiate it. And that will develop that resilience, that independence, those skills that we were just talking about. By only having one iPad, there may be times when they will choose to, or one game console, they will choose to play together or watch together in order to have a longer period of playing, period. And that actually is a much more collaborative and interactive way to do things. They will also have to do more emotional regulation work because they aren't always going to get their way. And that too is important because kids and tablets, depending on your kid, that can be tricky sometimes. And kids are not always great at emotional regulation. So let's talk about YouTube. YouTube, what's the big deal? Well, 95% of kids under 13 use regular YouTube, just regular YouTube, nothing special. And I'm here to tell you that regular YouTube is very much um, it is an unhealthy thing for kids to be looking at. Regular YouTube is unmonitored. It can have very disturbing adult content that is frightening, or it's inappropriate, or it's filled with language, or whatever. It reinforces beauty and body and gender stereotypes. Um, and the people on YouTube, often, the influencers often are just sharing all kinds of stuff, like, and create a sensibility that that sort of sharing is normal and should be expected, and that that sort of dysfunctional relationship stuff is normative. There really is almost no diversity, and that's true on YouTube Kids too. And there are just tons of ads with also and outrageous and risky stunts. We've all heard about these YouTube stunts that are, kids get harmed by these, YouTube stunts. So let's say you've got a kid, they're not really into the longer form YouTube. They just watch the YouTube shorts, right? Well, YouTube shorts is like TikTok. It's just TikTok. It's. So if you're like, nah, my kid's not having any social media until they're over 13. No, none of that TikTok, no Insta, no Snap, none of that. But they're on YouTube, they've got it. They're on YouTube Shorts all day long, up the wazoo. So it's endless scrolling. It's influencers, and some of these influencers are super young, like 8 or 9 years old. And the content of these YouTube Shorts is designed to stir big emotion, designed to sell products. It's got substance use and R-rated content, and because it's algorithm driven, even if your kid only kind of lays eyes on that content for a very short period, like 3 seconds, literally just doesn't keep scrolling, but pauses, more of that content gets delivered. So it's really kind of a shenanigan. I'll just call it what it is. It's a shenanigan. So there are options though as a parent, because YouTube does have guardrails. YouTube Kids does exist, and even though, believe me, I'm not in love with YouTube Kids, I really am not. I don't. It's all like goofball stuff and kooky and not diverse, and but you know what? My brothers watched the Three Stooges and they survived. But a little bit of YouTube Kids goes a long way. But for preteens and teens, there is a parent supervised version of YouTube. And every parent I've ever talked to had no idea this existed. They knew YouTube Kids existed, many of them, not all of them used it, but many of them knew it existed. Nobody knew that this preteen and teen supervised YouTube existed. So I encourage you to look into it. And with that in mind, as we get into the other social media, um, platforms, you can learn about all of the different ways and different types of guardrails on the digital glossary that the AAP has in place. And I have a whole section at the end of resources for you to have available to you. And I'll share my slide deck so that you can distribute it afterwards. I want to take a minute and talk about, so kids, okay, so we've got our digital native kids. They start out just FaceTiming with their relatives, and then they're scrolling through your pictures on your phone. And then the next thing you know, they're, asking for games, right? Games, natural, or YouTube kids, and then Minecraft and Roblox. Every kid I talk to, Minecraft and Roblox. I'm interested to learn that a lot of parents don't know very much about these. They know a little bit more about Minecraft, but not very much about Roblox. So Minecraft has three gameplay modes: the create mode, the survive mode, and the battle mode. They all take place within this kind of the Minecraft world, which is its own little world. You can play it by yourself, you can play it with others, you can play it only with your own people that you know, you can play it with random people, and you could have your own server of Minecraft, or you could play it on the web, in the cloud. You can accept friend requests from just random people, or only allow your child to accept friend requests from people they know in real life. So there are lots of ways that Minecraft, which frankly is a pretty cool game in the create mode, is, if I were picking, I would say Minecraft all day long, create mode. That one's a good one. Roblox, on the other hand, has some risks. It has some differences. It's an open platform. Roblox is a platform. It's not a game. Okay, so when people say, "Oh, I play Roblox all the time," well, it's a platform. It's like saying, "I play Chrome all the time." No, you don't play Chrome. So game makers upload their games to Roblox. And if your kid signs in properly and identifies themselves as being under 13, there are some age limits that would restrict certain types of games from kids under 13. Once your child is 13, or if they go in and change their age, or go in initially saying their birth year is different than it actually is, they can play, frankly, anything. And even though there are age ratings and restrictions, there isn't anything to stop someone who is 13 from playing a very, very adult game. And the adult content is both gory, violent, but it's also sexual. So there's a lot of different kinds of games on Roblox. Roblox also has multiplayer game. They're basically all multiplayer games, and it's pretty. You can pretty much you have to be open to playing with random people, but you can disable chat from people who you are not friends with, and you can you can tell your child you can only accept friend requests from people that you know in real life. So I think those are important things to know about those two games. They're super, super common in school age kids. So the $1 million question: when is the right age for a smartphone? There is no right age, okay? So there are so many factors that need to be taken into account when deciding when a person needs a smartphone. It depends on what the why. It's the why, not so much the when. So the why things would be, does your kid need to connect with friends? Do they need to arrange transportation before and after school? Do they need to connect with you or their other parent freely, either because they're living in two households or because they're going to a magnet school that's further away and so they may miss the bus or something? There may be a need that that drives the smartphone decision. Well, I'm sorry, that drives a phone decision. Smartphone is a little bit of a different question, right? Because you can get a phone, a phone that texts and calls that is not otherwise internet enabled. And that is a very, you know, good option in a lot of ways for kids who do need a phone prior to the age where you want them having access to the internet. And for example, if you have a 7 or 8 year old, or maybe an 8 to 10 year old who might be at home after school for a brief period of time while you're coming back from work, and you feel like they've got the maturity to be home for an hour on their own, but you want them to have a phone in case there is some emergency that they needed to get in touch with you, or, to call 911 or something. Well, okay, great. Perfect reason, for example, to have a phone. Doesn't need to necessarily be a smartphone. Okay. But when your child is old enough and you think, you know what, they're ready, we might give them a smartphone and maybe have them allow them, they can text their friends, maybe they'll be ready soon after for an app or something. Some things to think about are these. Can they actually handle the responsibility of a phone? And there is a quiz that the American Academy of Pediatrics has drafted, which is that Healthy Children quiz. And some of the things to think about are, can they get their homework done and handed in? Can they do their chores and without constant reminders? Are they losing all their other stuff? If so, they're probably not mature enough yet for a phone. If they can do all that and there's a legitimate reason for a phone, then it probably is a good time. One of the things you don't see on here is, well, everybody else has a phone. My best friend Susie has a phone. James down the street has a phone. And I didn't put it on here, but I'm not saying that that doesn't matter. I think that as parents, one of the things that we need to be aware of is our child's, ability to weather being the only kid who is or isn't doing X, Y, or Z. And of course, the old, as my mom would say, so would you jump off a bridge if everybody was jumping off a bridge? No. But I do think that there are times when, if your kid is responsible and otherwise ready, and their friend group all is connecting this way, and they're now potentially going to be missing out on that kind of communication, that does need to be factored in to this decision. When we talk then about getting a phone and about all this other screen stuff we've been talking about, whether it's games or whether it's watching movies and all the things, it's inevitable that parents ask about mental health, because if you've unless you've been under a rock somewhere for the last 5 years, this has been the topic of conversation, the relationship between technology use and mental health issues. And in part because There has been a huge increase in mental health um, difficulties in adolescents over the last 10 years. And we see here in this slide, the data comes from the CDC, that rates of anxiety, depression, and seeking help have all escalated during this time, even before the pandemic. So age of onset has declined from 14 and a half years to 12 and a half years for having difficulties with mental health. There's an increase in prevalence. So without a doubt, there has been an increase in difficulties with mental health over this time. It's easy to think then that it must be technology because, technology's been in place in a large way since that time. And that has definitely been the story that we've all been fed. The data tell us something else. When it comes to strictly screen time, which is not the whole story, obviously, but what the data tell us about screen time is that only a very teeny tiny itty bitty bit of reports around teen well-being scores are accounted for based on time spent on screens and social media. That day-to-day changes in screen time might affect your mood a little bit, but if we look at sustained changes in mood, screen time is not the direct link. What we have seen as in relationship is that teens who spend almost no time on their screens and teens who spend an exorbitantly large amount of time on their screens are shown to have they are more likely to have difficulty with anxiety or depression. But the vast majority of teens who are, clocking in at, small to even large amounts of time, this does not appear to be a factor in their mental health. Well, then what is? I would like you guys to scan the QR code if you don't mind and answer the question. I'll give you a couple minutes. Let me know in the chat if you're having difficulty with the QR code or anything. Now I'll go to the next slide. Hopefully the next slide will load. Okay. Got 6 people responding so far. Oh, wait. Okay, we're getting more now. All right. Well, I think we'll keep going here. Oh, we got a few more coming in here. We'll let it go. Okay. Well, I gave you guys some difficult choices here because all of them could be related to anxiety or depression, right? I mean, any one of them could have some effect on anxiety or depression. But of these, well, I'll keep letting it come in while we see here. Of these, the research tells us that the most significant contributing factor to teen anxiety and depression is the strength and quality of the relationship that teenagers have with their parents. So, social media is not the largest effect, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Yeah, now, of course, you guys are coming in with the relationship. I gave you the answer. Okay. So I gotta see why it's not going to the next. Oh, here we go. So, oops, now of course it went too far. Social media platforms have, so I want to define social media too so that we're all on the same page. YouTube is social media. Social media is any platform that allows interaction between you and another user based on your interests or a relationship you share in common. That includes posting user-generated content. So YouTube is also social media. And I think that for many parents, they don't think about YouTube as social media. And I think now that YouTube Shorts is so much more prominent, that it's becoming a little bit more visible to parents today. Roblox also is Roblox and Minecraft in some ways are as well, because you are connecting in this social environment over a shared interest, and you're posting or creating user-generated content. So the time that people are most susceptible to anxiety and depression, mental health issues, um, kind of getting set and sort of settling in is in this young adolescent age between 10 and 15. So I want to focus a little bit on that. Not to say that you can't become depressed when you're my age, but the adolescents who seem at greatest risk are the ones in this age group. And during this age, between 10 and 15, there's a lot happening, right? Puberty's happening. Their bodies are changing. Their emotions are changing. They're exposed to all kinds of imagery that is sending very clear messages that may or may not mesh with what they look like. And whether they're a boy or a girl, they're receiving messages that can be difficult to line up with who they appear to be becoming. And media, whether it's social media or whether it's game stuff or whether it is even just media watching like Netflix too late, crowds out sleep, it crowds out hobbies, it crowds out other kinds of physical activity, and it absolutely crowds out real in life social connections at a time when growing emphasis should be on peer relationships. So remember back when we were talking earlier about the idea that kids have this proctored childhood, they go from, you know, coached sports, throughout their elementary, or they go to dance class where they have a teacher, they have, they go to school, that's what teachers do. They're not allowed to play independently in the yard or at a playground by themselves. They can't just ride their bikes around the neighborhood and find their posse of kids like in the old days kids did. They aren't allowed to do any of that. And then they get to middle school at this, kind of this age, 11 to 15, and they say, you know what, I'm sick of playing those sports. I don't want to do it. And you're like, thank goodness, I'm tired of driving you around anyway. So you let them stop playing, which is fine. And you think to yourself, good, they can start hanging out with their friends. That's what they're supposed to do. But they don't have any skills to do that. They don't know how to ask a kid how to play or hang out together. And worse yet, because they've never done that before, they're afraid to, they're embarrassed to. What if the person says no? What if the person doesn't really even like them? What if they have a pimple that day? I mean, all the things, right? And because they need to do these kinds of social connecting at a time when they are most like vulnerable and like absolutely at their most self aware in the worst possible way, it makes it very hard for them to navigate peer relationships because they've never practiced them before independently. And then often they will turn to these technology-based interactions because it's safer. They can text somebody rather than talk to them. They can, pause and make sure every word is right before they send a reply. They can handle a disagreement or a relationship challenge through text because then they, you know, don't have to worry about overshowing the emotion that they might feel. And during this, very challenging age, they're also trying to figure out who they are, right? They're trying to kind of tell you as a parent that you don't know anything about anything and figure out when they're supposed to know everything about everything themselves, what everything is. And so having exposure to social media at that age, at this age, amplifies all the things that they think about. So if they are already starting to feel insecure, then social media may amplify that insecurity. If they're feeling confident or they have some really interesting um, interest or special thing that they want to learn about, social media can be awesome and can amplify that in a positive way. Um, but because they're also trying to become more independent and figure themselves out, especially if their relationship with their parents is a little bit dicey, they may be more apt to explore dangerous or inappropriate content because they aren't feeling like they need to be so connected. They might want to try to get parental attention or focus by doing something that would be shocking uh, or dangerous. So in these digital environments, teens have the opportunity to try on different identities. They feel like it's safer through this role play in video games or through doing kind of quirky social media profiles, focusing on this different way in which they want to try to be. And yet, in a lot of ways, that can create opportunities for them to feel less safe. So in their mind, the mind of an adolescent, what they actually need is at school, they need to practice. They need to practice managing conflict and resolving it in real life. In the community, they need opportunity to see their friends and be part of a team or group that isn't necessarily always proctored by an adult. And they need to do things that take them out of their own head to help others. At home, they need structure, they need sleep, they need boundaries to be set, they need time to connect with you, and they need space where they can focus on their homework. They need you to help them collaboratively figure out how to cope with their, screen habits, but also cope with things that are going on in life and learn how to do truly adult things. So during this time, when they really want to be grown up and they want to have all the trappings of adulthood that might include an internet-enabled smartphone, you have to decide, is your child and is your relationship with your child in a place where that's a good idea? And importantly, this is an age where reassuring your child, boy or girl, reassuring your, oh shoot, let's see what, reassuring your child that everybody's different, that they are perfectly made as they are, that there is no beauty that is an ideal image, no, strength or body habitus that is just right. And that actually figuring out who you are is normal. You might decide one day you're going to be a punk rocker, another day you're going to be an emo, another day you're going to be an artist. But it's important that how you present yourself digitally is needs to be who you are. And authenticity is very valuable because it shows that you are comfortable with whoever you are that day in your own skin. I would never recommend a social media account before age 13 and probably 14 unless your child is really solidly entrenched in who they are. And we'll talk about what a family media plan is. It can be very helpful at setting limits and boundaries, also helping them understand that creepy or harmful content, things that make them feel like gross inside, they can show you or tell you about, and you will not get mad. That you will just say, let me show you how to flag it or block it. And that if at any time they are bullied or they are sexted, that you will absolutely help them figure out what to do next. It is true, we've just talked about this, that social media engagement before age 14 does increase the risk of anxiety and depression. So guiding this conversation, you've got to know your child. And ask them these questions. How do you connect with your friends? What do you use your tech for? What platforms do you use? How does it make you feel? You know, what, what are you crowding out? Like, because you're using your tech, what don't you have time to do? And this is where we were just talking about that parent use of media and your relationship with your teen are the factors that are going to be the most important ones to determine your teen's healthy relationship with their own technology. So if you're a heavy tech user yourself, try to diminish that tech use around your kids. These are great questions to ask your kids. Do you feel better, worse, or the same after you've been gaming, streaming, or on social media? Do you post or engage, or are you just observing? And do you feel like you're missing out on things? Do you get enough sleep? Should you track your child? This is our last segment, and then we'll start taking questions. And then I do have a bunch of stuff in the review section or the references section. I didn't say how should you track your child. I said, should you track your child? Here are the questions I want you to ask yourself before you decide to track your child. And by tracking, I mean Life 360 kind of stuff, or Find My Friends. Ask yourself these questions. Will knowing my child's location keep them safe? The answer is no, it will not keep them safe. If they're going to be harmed in some way, knowing where they are will not keep them out of harm's way. Parents sometimes say to me, yeah, but if I don't hear from them, I'll know where to go last to go look for them. And I say to parents all the time, that may be true, but if there's something and you haven't heard from them and you call the police to help you, they can ping the phone like that and also know exactly where to go. So, next question. Will being able to see where my child's located encourage me to let them do more things on their own? I think this is a critical question. Parents often are so afraid to let their kids in the world, like even in the yard, to play. Like I have friends of somebody who works with my husband. He has his colleague has two kids, a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. They're not allowed to play in the yard while the parents are at work during the summer. And they live in a very safe neighborhood, like super safe, not on a busy road, nothing. And it, I was shocked. I'm like, oh, so they're in the house all day long, every single day of the summer? That just seems crazy to me. So we, as parents, sometimes feel like they can go anywhere, they can be on YouTube, no constraints, but they can't play in the yard. I'm not, that just, wow, I was surprised by that. So if being able to see where your child's located would allow you the confidence to let them do more, like walk to the park on their own or ride their bike to a friend's house, maybe then that could be a reason to use a tracking device for a period of time. And then if you, knowing that your child can call you, if they have a phone, that may allow you to let them go. Would, in your mind's eye, would your child be going somewhere without telling you? And if so, think about your own childhood or adolescent experiences in the world. Kids tell me all the time, well, my parents have Life 360. I really, I can't go anywhere anyway. Well, how are they going to test their boundaries? How are they going to learn to like walk up to a line somewhere and walk back and make those decisions? So I think it's important to think about that. So let's do some questions. I don't know how you want to do the questions. Do you want to raise hands? I don't know if I'll be able to see everyone's hand. How does it work? If you raise your hand, maybe you'll come to the top of the chart or something.
We can try that, or if you want to just try unmuting and just asking
Oh,
your
yeah,
question.
that's good. Just unmute.
For that too. Certainly lots of information there. It was absolutely interesting to see what the research says about parents, social
Yeah.
media use as well, as I'm sure we're all culprits on that one.
All right. Aaliyah, you have a question? No. Yes, you have a question. Go ahead. Unmute. Oh, no, be right back. Okay. Are there any tips for weaning kids off social media? So that's a really great question. I think so. I'll talk briefly about the family media toolkit that the AAP has. So if I think JP, there are a couple of things to consider here. One is your child at all motivated to do it or not? Is the social media are there any consequences, downsides, whatever word you want to use, for their social media use or overuse? And I think if there are, and you can get them to um, talk about those in any way, then you might be able to come up with a collaborative approach. depending on their age, once kids are in high school, it's really not valuable anymore for parents to say you can't, to kind of go on the router and just turn off the internet or set the limit on Instagram at the router level and say it's turning off at whatever time it's turning off. It needs to be more collaborative than that. And what I encourage parents to do is if you are working on a goal with your kid who is high school age, is to sit down once a week and say, let's look at your screen time. What are your which apps are you using? And then to say what goals do you want to set? If you want to cut down your TikTok time from, an average of 4 hours a day to three hours a day, what are you going to, how are you going to do that? And if the kid goes, I don't want to do that, then I think coming up with a mutually shared goal is going to be important. So the family media plan, which it's at healthychildren.org, is a way to really foster that conversation and encourage a collaborative approach. So it isn't a parent just going and say, you need to use less TikTok. Um, and that is it is a very collaborative approach. Aaliyah, how old are your kids? Yeah, so Jane, your question about the family media plan is actually designed for a family with multi-age kids. So the family media plan has plans so that you integrate the plan. You do a plan that might be very different depending on the kids' ages and depending on what their media use is. Like if one does games and one's on the iPad and one's, uses a phone, you set up the family media plan that each person and parents are involved too. So what's your media plan? Each member of the family has their own element of the family media plan. So that's all integrated in that family media plan. So, and that's why it isn't like every kid has 27.6 minutes on whatever the device is. That's not how it works. And it's very good in that way. So, Aaliyah, your kids are 14, 11, and 21, you said, and you want to know your um, question was, how do I get my teenage kids off their phone and be a good kid? Oh my God, I love that question. I love that question. So that's a packed question right there. Um, I think I don't know what your definition of a good kid is, so that's tricky. And a 21-year-old, I think you don't have a lot of opportunity there to have much as much influence there. Your 14 and 11-year-old, though, you do. And I think that I would start with in the references or resources section of the deck, which we'll distribute to you. There are conversation starters to get a dialogue going rather than just a parental, here's the slam down rule. Because if you have a slam down rule and the only answer is to take the phone away or the iPad away or whatever, that's only going to work for a short period of time, and it's going to actually foster worse behavior, which is exactly what you don't want. So I think by teaching digital literacy with your kids and fostering more independence for them too, saying, look, I want you guys to be able to do more. What do you want to do more of outside of stuff with your phones or outside of stuff online? What else do you want to do more of? And maybe your 14-year-old goes, well, I want to be able to hang out with my friends. I want to be able to walk to school. I want to be able to ride my bike. I want to be able to whatever. Um, then you will need to kind of do that, be brave, and begin to say, okay, I need to help you make that happen. Let's talk about that. Now, if I can let you do a little bit of this, we need to, and work together towards that goal because having her gain some or him gain some independence is important. And you're right, Somi, when you do limit the games and the media, they are disconnected from their age group. You're absolutely right. And so you, I think that it is important to recognize that. And there are two, it depends on how old the kids are, of course. So depending on their ages, there are a couple of ways to think about that. One is if they are of an age where, frankly, you don't care because they're 7, then you can say, yeah, sorry, you'll get to talk to them in school tomorrow, but it's time to be taking your bath and getting ready for bed. If they're 10 or 12, then you can say, you know what, our family has, media off at this time. If you and your friends want to connect, that's great. You need to talk with them tomorrow and help them understand that media time ends at our house at X hour. And know that I want you to be friends. You can have them all over. You can have a game night at our house. Let's do that. Um, and how do you get them off their device? How do you get them? If you have a central charging area that is not in their bedroom, and that's your plan, that's where they go, then you you would have all the devices in one place. And if you have what I call screen out times, where there's no screens in the bedrooms overnight, there's no screens at meals, if that can become your routine, then they will be off their screens at least 4 times that are family valued times. So meal times and sleep times. So I think, but dealing with so back to Somi's question about half the stuff they're talking with each other, what they're not aware, then I think then depending on what your constraints are on that time needs to be, socially appropriate. So if you have a 10th grader and the time is 8 p.m., that's not appropriate. So Aaliyah, okay, so wait, I gotta, let's see, back to here. What's a good age for social media such as TikTok and Instagram? Um, it depends a little bit on the kid, not before 13. And I would say 13 or 14, depending on the kid. And it could be older, depending on the kid, but not before 13 or 14. So, so how do you get them off their device without screen time? For the 11 and the 14-year-old, you can at the router level have their IP address for their screen, have a time that the router says you can no longer be on the internet. So you can do that at the router level so that their device just won't work anymore after a certain time of the day or the night. Okay. Rohit's question. Kids have a lot of peer pressure, having a smartphone, playing online games, and they use that as a reason. How do you effectively tackle that? Yeah, they do have a lot of pressure. That's true. Yeah. And they don't need a smartphone to play an online game, nor do they need a smartphone to, you know, they don't need a smartphone for that. So you can say, great, we have a family iPad. There's no reason you can't connect with your peers with our family iPad until you're the age where we give people their own iPad. I'm not stopping you from connecting with people. And I think a personal iPad around that age of 5th, 6th, 7th grade, somewhere in there, is about the age where you're fostering those independent peer relationships. So it's around middle school that you're doing that. And that's the age where they might have their own device, whether it's a tablet or it may not need to be a phone. See, that's where I might do a tablet at home. That's where it can still be in that common charging area at night, and they can play their online games. They can connect with their friends, and it's still, yours. How do you, so is there a right amount of screen time? The right amount of screen time, there is no data for me to answer that. What I can tell you is that the right amount of screen time will depend on the those five C's. Who your child is, like, are they naturally um, easygoing and they separate from their screen easily? Are they, that sort of thing? What is the content that they're looking at? What else could they be doing that isn't their screen? And are they able to, crowding out is like sleep and all that. So are they emotionally regulated pretty well or not because of that screen stuff? So there isn't, and it will be different, I imagine, for your kids' ages. An 11-year-old is going to be texting and communicating with friends, so their amount of screen is going to be way, way more than a younger kid would be. So, and it's also different weekday to weekend too. Like if it's a rainy Saturday and you don't have any counter programming, you might allow more screen time or you might decide to play. I encourage parents to play these games with their kids too, so that you have a sense of what the games are. It can be a family thing together. I think it is important to get a better sense of what they're doing. Um, so, but the right amount depends a lot on, do they have hobbies? Are they developing other hobbies? Do they have, are they going to sleep easily? When they do need to separate, are they separating easily or not? Never use the device as an emotional regulator. Like if your kid is having a fit about something, don't say, oh, go calm down, go play a game on your device. No, please don't. Kids need to learn how to regulate their emotions without using a device. Um, okay, let's see. Yeah, you can't, Aaliyah, you can't make your kids happy. Okay? Let's just call it like we see them. You cannot make them happy. You can say, look, I'm not your cruise director. There's only so much time you can use your device, and I know you're bored and you don't feel like there's anything else on earth to do, but you'll need to figure out something else to do. And no, they won't be happy. And yes, for a period of time, they will be very whining and yelling and, oh, you're so mean and, because they'll want you to give in. And the more like dramatic those emotions are, the more steadfast you'll probably want to be, because they clearly are very connected to their devices and probably do need to develop other skills for kind of managing their emotional downtime. Um, are there any suggestions how to handle devices that children receive from school? Yes. Okay. So school devices that come home for homework usually have enough firewalls around them that I don't think you have to worry about them kind of stumbling on content that's going to be problematic. Generally speaking, I encourage parents to say, you can do your homework on the device and then it goes away. And that's what the device is for, so that it's kind of like your work device, this is my work phone, this is my personal phone. So leave them separate. So seventh and eighth, they should get a phone, right? Not necessarily. They might need a phone, but they don't necessarily need a smartphone. Okay, they don't need an internet connected phone necessarily, but they probably do need a device to call you or to text their friends. Um, yeah, that is another good app, Diva. Thank you. Or Divya, sorry, Divya. That is another good one. Yes, to set boundaries on social media. Yeah, so how do we convince them positively healthy way to track them when they are grown into high school and above by giving yeah, I'm not sure that So I will ask you, Somi, why do you want to track them when they're older and above? Why?
I just need to make sure that, see, one of my children, he actually having a car, and then he is going to work, and then sometimes volunteer work, like for probably 30 miles away from home.
Uh-huh.
And at the same time, he's not pro into driving or anything like that. One of my friend told me that she actually download one of the app, and then her child is into an accident. Before even the child called the police, she called them, and then save the kid, or take care of it. So I just want to know how I can convince my children, to I don't want them to feel like I'm entering into their personal space for tracking them all the time. uh,
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's a hard one, honestly, because I feel like the accident occurred, um, and um, in that scenario, and there are many other ways to allow for automatic notification of 911, for example, in accident settings. Like even the kid's own phone could have notified 911 automatically, for example, and not necessarily have required or had the benefit of that of need the tracking wouldn't necessarily have been valuable. I think there are a lot of downsides to tracking kids that are not um, that the upside of tracking, the only upside of tracking is that you as the parent, your worry is managed to the detriment of the child, teenager, young adult, to the detriment of their need to become more capably, freely independent. And I feel like a parent's worry should not trump that child's development. So that's my thought on that. So for Shibu and Nimisha have a question. We have 13-year-old, 10-year-old using Apple Watches with parental controls. They use it mainly when they're outside the house to an activity. Yes, I think that is perfect, really, honestly. They're still young, 13 and 10. They're using the Apple Watch. You might at that point have they can call you, they could text you. You might at that age have enabled some Find My Watch or whatever on there because they're young and you don't necessarily know whether or not to trust their judgment. You haven't, they're not. So I think I think that's the right age. And then once kids are in high school, maybe ninth grade, 10th grade, that's when that monitoring, tracking needs to be removed.
Thank you, Dr. Ashay. So it looks like we're approaching the end of our allotted time here. So you mentioned you had some resources that you
Yeah,
want.
yeah, I definitely, let me just throw the slides up really quick. I'll just so that you can see them. And oh, there we go, my goofy slide. And then these will be the family media tools. This is the family media plan, which every family member gets a different thing. There are also conversation starters, and you can ask questions in the social media mental health area, um, how to build these healthy relationships with your younger kids, bunch of lists of resources for mental health resources as well. And then ways to think about why you might want to limit time or how to limit time if you are just bored and relaxed and decompressing, set a timer for 20 minutes, 40 minutes if you want to learn something, 60 minutes if you're connecting with friends, 90 for entertainment. So I'll share my deck with you, Vipin, and then you'll have it to distribute out.
That sounds very good. Yeah, we'll certainly make that available via our website. We also have the session recorded, so we'll post that on the KCCNA YouTube channel as well. So absolutely, we'll make this resources available. So Stacey, are you on the line? Are you able to do a little things? Can't keep track of too many people on here, but
Yeah, hi Vivin.
all right, there you go.
Yeah, I
So
can.
Sujeji is our joint secretary. She's part of our executive team. So Sujeji, if you can please.
Hi, Doctor. It was actually a great opportunity to hear from you. And most of our parents who has kids of that age, I'm pretty sure they got an excellent opportunity to learn a lot and help their kids to go in the right track. And especially, I was listening the whole thing and then tracking the kids at certain age, and then beyond that, it may not be the right thing. I have 4 kids myself; they're all in 20s and above, so I never track them. But it has pros and cons. But kids from, you know, below teen and during teenage, the measures are different. So everything has its pros and cons. We really learned a lot, and we are going to use this resource and your decks of slides. And if any questions, I'm pretty sure Vipin will be able to reach out to you and
Oh,
help
yeah.
our community. And thank you so much again. It is really, really valuable.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
had a great time. You guys asked great questions. I love the fact that you were willing to engage. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you for all the audience. So this is just a starting point from KCCNA. And thank you, Vipin.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So Dr. O'Shea, so thank you very much for making the process so easy. It really was a pleasure. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone, once again, from my side as well, for joining. We appreciate it. We hope to bring you more.
Yep.
Everybody
Have a great, yeah.
Yep, everybody have a good rest of the evening and a good Sunday evening and a good week ahead. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.